Officer Dixon, can you tell me the difference between a black man and a...
Oh, whoa. No, we're not doing that.
I was just asking you the difference between a black man and a...
No.
Really? I just want to know the difference between a black man and a...
Don't do it!
I just...
Nope.
Want to know...
Don't say it.
The difference...
You watch yourself.
Between a black man...
I'm not kidding.
And a...
And a what?
And a black woman.
Gender is a complex social construct that goes beyond biology and encompasses cultural, societal, and personal factors. Was that really your question?
No. But with that one, I get to keep all the teeth in my mouth.
Smart man. Welcome to Does This Still Work? The podcast looks at always and asks, does this still work? I'm Joe Dixon.
And I'm George Romacka. And today we're discussing Deep Cover.
Deep Cover.
Deep Cover.
Deep Cover.
From 1992. Nothing to do with Deep Throat. The informant in the Watergate scandal.
Oh, that's not where my mind went.
And some historical context. First, podcasty stuff. You can reach us at dtswpod@gmail.com, on Facebook, Letterboxd, and Counter Social. Please tell your friends about us and leave 5-star ratings everywhere. You can pick what we watch and get extra per episode content by funding us on Patreon for as little as $1 a month at patreon.com/dtswpod, just like the patrons that chose this movie, because this is a Patron's Choice episode.
Yep.
Now, Joe, take us back to 1992.
This crime movie from 1992 about an undercover cop who goes rogue touches on the crack baby myth of the 1980s and 90s. The theory was that children born to mothers who used crack would grow up, to quote from the movie, as children who don't learn to walk or crawl or talk on time. They'd have deformities, mental deformities, brain damage, lower IQ. They go to school but would be unable to learn. They will grow up to be violent. They would never be capable of forming deep emotional ties. And there would be millions of these babies. A generation of them.
It sounds like you just described cops as a cohort.
Brain damage, lower IQ? Yeah, I guess so.
Unable to learn, violent.
Of course, we know that's bullshit. About the babies, not about cops. But that's what was out there. Back in 2010, the NPR show Tell Me More did a segment called Crack Babies 20 years later, and we have a link to that in the show notes. And I think you should give that a listen to give you some perspective after you finish with our show.
Because after our show, you definitely need perspective.
You're at NPR, we're sending some audience your way.
If you ever feel like, returning the favor, great.
Now, to be fair, even back in 1992, some journalists did push back on the idea that being drug-addicted moms led to Frankenstein's children. One of those journalists was syndicated columnist Ellen Goodman. She wrote a piece picked up by the Los Angeles Times. Since this movie is set in LA, my news source going forward is going to be the Los Angeles Times. Headline, George.
The myth that became a media hit.
Goodman talks about the craze of stories about monster children and how the press may have to rethink the moral panic it helped create. I'm now going to quote a doctor that Goodman quotes. I was going to paraphrase this, but I want people to hear what this real-life doctor says, quoting the piece. Dr. Ira Chasnoff, who did some of the original work identifying the problem babies of mothers who took cocaine in combination with other drugs, is about to publish the results of his 2-year follow-up study. It says, in his words, their average developmental functioning level is normal. They are no different from other children growing up. They are not the retarded imbeciles people talk about, end quote. Nice medical analysis, but, correct. Could have maybe not used the R word, but, well, all right. It was the 90s.
He's characterizing a viewpoint that others have.
I guess that's fair, yeah.
Yeah, he's not denigrating anybody by saying that. He's saying that this imaginary monster doesn't exist.
True enough. Yeah, I guess that's fair. Goodman also points out some of the reasons for a child not doing well in school did not necessarily stem from the kid having a crack mother so much as it stemmed from that child being hungry or suffering some form of neglect at home.
You think?
You think? In other words, if the kid was failing to learn, it didn't mean the child wasn't capable because of brain damage, but because of outside forces that made learning impossible. It's difficult to concentrate in class if your home situation is shit.
Case in point, I will tell you that's true. It was really hard for me, and my problems at home weren't drugs. Mine was just a freaking mother that was a paranoid schizophrenic. That was enough to make it hard for me to focus at school. It didn't help that I had ADHD and I didn't find out until I was 29, but still.
And this really should have been obvious, but good luck selling papers about hungry children. That's boring. Stories about how children wanted to kill you? Now that people never tire of reading.
Mm-hmm.
In this piece, Goodman quotes a researcher who believes the reason much press went with the crack baby stories is, one, crack was new, even though it was just another form of cocaine, as made to seem exotic. After all, at the same time, kids were being born to parents who drank alcohol and smoked cigarettes. None of those are good for babies either, but somehow didn't incite the same sort of crazy notions that those babies would grow up to be moral defects. The same researcher also believes the fact that the drug was popular among black people, especially poor black people, helped make it scary. You know, racism.
Mm-hmm.
Something this film also mentions. A character straight up says, you keep the people in the suburbs afraid, and they will keep voting Republican.
Sure does. And he's sure right.
He sure was right. They knew what they were talking about back in the day. And it's still true today, sadly.
Mm-hmm.
But enough with the babies. How were Undercover Cops doing in 1992? Well, I found one who could have been doing better. Headline, George.
Undercover Cop snagged in dark web of drug world.
A Chula Vista cop by the name of George Hart was busted for stealing 3.5 pounds of cocaine because he was addicted to crack. The article says he denied stealing the cocaine, but he was a 16-year veteran and a crackhead, so who knows? By his own admission, he would arrest those selling or using drugs, then go off to celebrate by smoking some crack. Which is one way to enjoy a drug bust, I must say.
Mm-hmm.
As we know, cops have been known to shut down illegal weed dispensaries and then use the weed themselves. Remember that news story? Look it up, it's real.
And there's almost certainly more than one.
And it's got to be more than one, for sure.
If there's one, there's more.
And the dummy cops in that store, I think it was also in LA, they're on videotape. Just munching away on the edibles they busted the guy for. But anyway, that's another story. Back to this crack-loving cop from 92. I will quote. Through sheer determination and willpower, Hart eventually beat his drug habit in 1990, but at a heavy price. Hart, 46, said the combination of stress and cocaine caused irreparable damage to his heart. In May 1991, following quadruple bypass heart surgery, Hart retired. He is now under consideration for a heart transplant. And after his retirement, Hart thought that his drug problems were behind him. However, on May 21st of this year, the San Diego County Grand Jury indicted him on 8 felony counts ranging from grand theft to forgery. The charges stem from alleged illegal activities that occurred in 1989. Among the charges was an allegation that Hart stole 2 AK-47 assault rifles, which were later found to be in police custody, that were seized from a drug dealer. But the most serious charge against Hart was the allegation that he stole 3.5 pounds of cocaine. The drug, which is valued at $100,000 at the time, has never been recovered. Hart denied stealing the cocaine and the other charges against him.
He snorted it all. That's why they can't find it.
Well, that would explain his bad heart. Now, he says he got addicted because he was working undercover and a dealer thought he was a cop and forced him to snort some blow to prove that he wasn't. For what he said, he was instantly addicted. Personally, I call bullshit. I think he made that story up for sympathy. I think it's pretty well proven that you don't become addicted after one use. Addiction takes time and repeated use. Becoming dependent overnight are lies we tell children and Fox News viewers. Also, if you're in a situation, if you have to use, you're supposed to let your superior officers know. He didn't.
It's one thing, in this movie we see it, and I guess it's true. Like, when you're undercover, you're not just undercover. Unless you're, like, spy levels of undercover, you check in with your freaking team. You check in with who you report to.
I think even in spy stuff, you're supposed to check. I don't just let people go willy-nilly. Because, I don't know what you're doing. I can't tell you guys anything what I'm up to. Like, what the? Anyway, I'm not saying he wasn't an addict. If you read the story, he clearly was. I just don't buy that they made me do it story. Sounds like bullshit. Also bullshit, in my opinion, is his story of the missing cocaine. He said he checked it out for a sting that never happened, and then asked another cop by the name of Nate Hine to return it to the station. This cop, well, I'll quote from the paper. On September 18th, 1991, Hines, 34, an 8-year Chula Vista police veteran, pleaded guilty to single count of grand theft and the sale of 55 pounds of ephedrine used to manufacture methamphetamine. The grand theft charge stemmed from allegations that Hines stole money from drug dealers. The ephedrine had been seized from drug dealers, and Hines later stole it from the Chula Vista police property room. The theft was discovered in January 1991 when one of Hines' female informants was arrested with the drug in a motel room. I'm glad they had to arrest someone to figure out their drugs were missing and not look at the room and go like, hey, where are the rest of the drugs? Mm-hmm. That's good police work.
You'd think that the police inventory lock, like the evidence lockup, should be something that is inventoried daily at a minimum.
Yeah, you would think.
Like somebody has a list of everything that's supposed to be there and checks that everything that's supposed to be there is there. Because cops, I don't know who needs to be told this, they're not all good.
Some say they're all bastards.
Some do. I do.
Anyway, back to the story. The informant told police that Hines had given her the ephedrine to sell for him. End quote. Hines denied Hart gave him the cocaine to return to the police. So two dirty cops pointing fingers at each other. Good stuff. Whatever happened to George Hart? As you would imagine, here was a cop who used drugs on the job and almost certainly stole from the property room. Of course, they threw the book at him. Well, maybe more like a pamphlet rather than the book. This guy got 9 of the charges dropped against him. He pled guilty to 1 felony charge of signing his supervisor's name on a drug enforcement agency document. Remember, this is happening during the time when you could get serious time for smoking crack. You still can. He got 180 days in jail. He was expected to serve that time from home. The other fella I mentioned, Hines, he got 12 counts dismissed. He pled guilty to 2 felonies and got 2 years in state prison. You know, I don't watch that many cop shows, but I'm pretty sure Law & Order and CSI don't know how soft on crime we are in this country when a criminal is a cop.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, George, tell us about Deep Cover.
Like, I wish I had more to add on to that, but it's just depressingly true. All right. This was directed by Bill Duke. He played the big bad in the worst-rated episode of the 2000s Battlestar Galactica series. He was Phelan in Season 2, Episode 14, Black Market, a boss of a criminal black market that catered to even the most depraved human behaviors.
Weren't the Pylons, weren't they machines, or am I thinking of... I never watched this.
Cylons were the machines.
Oh.
His name was Phelan.
Okay. Well, as an actor, I've seen Bill Duke in X-Men, The Last Stand, and Car Wash. As a director, I've seen his work in A Rage in Harlem. Car Wash, no, whoa, whoa, whoa. Talking about the car wash, yeah. We should see that movie.
You know what I would tell you to do?
Put it on the list.
Yeah. This was written by Michael Tolkin, who also wrote Deep Impact, the one where Morgan Freeman became president, and also written by Henry Bean.
Michael Tolkin's work I don't know, but Henry Bean's The True Believer I saw. He wrote the screenplay for that.
This one, nothing to write home about. Blurbs. IMDb says a uniformed cop is recruited by a drug enforcement agent to infiltrate a drug smuggling ring looking to expand its operation.
Okay.
Sure. Amazon says Laurence Fishburne stars as Russell Stevens Jr., maverick Cleveland cop with a turbulent past, handpicked by the DEA to infiltrate an international cocaine cartel based in Los Angeles.
Well, that's just wrong.
I'm going to disagree with handpicked, because that usually means you don't interview a bunch of people first.
Well, so he's not a maverick cop.
No. I mean, he's not a good cop according to cops, but I'll mention that in a minute.
Yeah, sure. But also, maverick cop in the movie line usually means someone like Rambo Rambo wasn't a cop, but whatever Stallone-type character or...
Die Hard.
Or Die Hard. Yeah, these type of cops don't follow the rules and do whatever, blah, blah, blah. Mm-hmm. If anything, the problem with half of Laurence Fishburne's character is he's too big following the rules.
Mm-hmm. So, I think we are actually going to completely dispense with cast sections from here on out. Because I've just been peppering, and now it just seems to make more sense to tell the fucking story and introduce people as it goes.
Okay, however you want to do it, buddy.
After the film opens to a slow-motion scene of people very happily consuming narcotics, we'll get Russell Stevens Jr.'s origin story. His crackhead dad brings him along to rob a liquor store, cautioning his son to not ever do drugs like he does. After robbing the store, he stops in the end zone for some excessive celebration, and the store clerk shoots him in the back with a shotgun.
Well, that's one way to make sure your kid never does drugs. Mm-hmm. First, do it in the car, threaten to hit him. If you remember, he's not the best. And then he's like, hey, now I'm going to rob the store and then get shot. Mm-hmm. Don't do drugs. Okay, Dad, you convinced me. I must say, as bad as my father was, I never had that problem with him.
Yeah, your dad is better than many dads in that he wasn't around to do any of the bad shit.
Do you remember your dad smoked crack? Did he ever?
My dad never smoked crack. My dad doesn't even smoke cigarettes. Never did. He hated that
just
my
your mom was the smoker, yep. Cigarette smoker. And maybe crack. Did your mom ever smoke crack?
Not that I'm aware of.
Is it possible?
Sure. I mean, she had a whole fucking life that I didn't know about. Like, the kid grows up to be a bastard, and that's who we meet when we meet him, being interviewed for a special undercover assignment. He's played by Laurence Fishburne.
For this podcast, we've seen Laurence Fishburne in Boys in the Hood, episode 9, The Color Purple, episode 34, What's Love Got to Do with It, episode 132, and The Matrix, episode 139.
And I know him as the yellow lightsaber-wielding Mace Windu from the unmentionable Star Wars prequels.
Unmentionable.
Russell is being interviewed by Carver, a mid-level DEA manager who likes to start his interviews with a question. What's the difference between a black person and a... He's played by Charles Martin Smith.
We last saw Charles Martin Smith as a much nicer and way hornier character in American Graffiti, episode 44.
Mm-hmm.
He was much nicer then. I liked him better there.
Russell isn't the first black cop being interviewed for this assignment, so we hear that question a few times. Russell is a bad cop, because movie cops are never good cops. By that, I mean his evaluations say he's got a problem with authority, because cops who don't have that can't even be imagined to be heroes. Eventually, he's chosen for the assignment. He'll be going deep undercover in the LA drug scene, working his way through the ranks to get close to the major distributors. We'll meet them in a bit. He'll be using the name John Hull as his cover, but I'm just going to keep calling him Russell. He gets himself, on the DEA's dime, a cheap apartment room, and meets his landlady, Mrs. G, played by Sandra Gould, who Joe has some trivia about.
The landlady is Mrs. Kravitz from Bewitched, of all things. There are a lot of TV actors from the 70s in this movie, and I'm positive that these people got cast because they are personal friends with the director, Bill Duke. I should say, she's the second Mrs. Kravitz. The actress to play Mrs. Kravitz had cancer, the original Mrs. Kravitz, and didn't tell the producers when she got cast because she wanted to work. Eventually, the cancer caught up with her, she died, and they had to cast a new Mrs. Kravitz. So, for you trivia fans out there, not only are there two Darrens, but Bewitched also had two Mrs. Kravitzes.
Nifty.
Do you have any idea what I'm talking about, George?
Yeah, I do.
Oh, you know what Bewitched is?
Yeah.
I'm shocked.
For the audio medium listeners, I was wiggling my nose with my finger. He's got a neighbor lady with a kid. There will be more than enough characters to track, so I'm going to spoil the near end of the film here. She'll overdose to death, and somehow, by the rules of finders keepers, the kid ends up with Russell.
Yeah, but that made no sense. He met this kid a couple of times. He's the neighbor. How's he raising this child?
Uh-huh. A lot of the exposition is through narration by Russell, and he describes the first link in the chemical capitalist chain, Eddie.
Eddie, in his red caddy and his nice clothes that his mama must have bought him. He supplied the street dealers. He was a crazy, good-natured, desperate asshole with a life expectancy of about a half an hour.
Eddie is played by Roger Guenveur Smith.
We just saw Mr. Smith in Get Out on the Bus for episode 156. But before that, we saw him in Do the Right Thing for episode 2. We also saw him in American Gangster for episode 83 and Malcolm X for episode 116. So he's seen a lot of Roger.
Russell buys drugs off of one of Eddie's drug-dealing child employees. After Russell walks away, a rival dealer comes up and kills the kid. Eddie shows up to pour one out for his dead homie, and that's that. That rival dealer is Ivy, played by James T. Morris, and we don't know him from anything else.
No.
He only had like 4 credits. Ivy's driver/lover is a blonde white lady dressed like one of the cop-themed guys in the Blue Oyster Bar in Police Academy.
That's actually tried any thought of that. You're right. That's exactly what she looks like.
Credited as Ivy's driver, she's played by Alyssa Christensen.
She's mostly a stunt performer, and I've seen her work in Face Off and Wayne's World. As an actor, I've seen her in Another 48 Hours.
Knowing that Eddie now has a hole in his employee roster, Russell starts getting in close to the guy. Eddie is that guy in a bar. If you can stand to listen to him for more than 10 seconds, he will be your best friend. Eddie is not the brightest in a box of particularly low wattage bulbs, and gets himself arrested. Now we go to the clean, well-furnished home of Eddie's supervisor, who is desperately trying to help his daughter with her homework while his wife cooks.
Daddy, why can't I just use a calculator?
Good question, kid.
Is that what you say to your children when you're teaching them? Why can't I just use a calculator? Because you're supposed to learn it. That's why.
I let them use a calculator, because we all have calculators now, with us all the time.
Still supposed to know the work. Tisk tisk.
This guy is a lawyer with 2 first names, David Jason, and he's played by Jeff Goldblum.
The first thing I ever saw Jeff Goldblum in was the terrible movie called Thank God It's Friday, which I believe we've discussed about in a previous episode. On TV, I saw Goldblum in a TV series he did with Ben Vereen called 10 Speed and Brown Shoe. It was also terrible, and I fucking love that show.
And I think you've said that before, too.
Have I? Okay. And we've seen Jeff in Jurassic Park for episode 75. And he also had a cameo in Annie Hall, what we saw in episode 5. I've never seen this, but Kit and George covered Earth Girls Are Easy in episode 86. And I've also seen Jeff Goldblum in The Fly, Independence Day, Thor Ragnarok, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, The Player, Silverado, The Big Chill, and Death Wish, which may be the second thing I saw him in.
A knock at the door brings 2 more people. The first is David's boss, Felix Barbosa, who manages to look like a melding of Peter and Paul from Peter, Paul, and Mary, played by Gregory Sierra.
There were 2 sitcoms from 1970 I saw this man in. One was Sanford and Son, and the other was Barney Miller. For this podcast, we saw him in a Patrons-only episode of the James Woods movie, Vampires.
I missed that.
To my surprise, he was in Towering Inferno, which I don't remember at all. I remember the movie, I don't remember being in it, but whatever. I also forgot, but he was also in Beneath the Planet of the Apes.
The second person is Felix's human ledger, day planner, conscience, and probably fuck toy, Gopher, played by Sidney Lassick.
He's a character actor, and for this podcast, we know him from One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, episode 7.
Felix is there to tell David that Eddie got arrested and to introduce the concept of giving information to the police as a thing that Felix is worried about, so we can all be mad at him later when he does that same thing. Off screen, David does some lawyer magic and gets Eddie out. Then Eddie sets up a job interview for Russell with David, who immediately clocks Russell as a cop. Eddie's like, no, he's not, and that's enough to get Russell's foot in the door to start moving product. Before long, Eddie hangs Russell out to dry as his way of cooperating with the cops for his own leniency. 2 cops are of note here. The first, with the unfortunate name of Taft, uses religious jargon and tries to appeal to Russell's assumed duty to black people to not, pump black communities full of drugs. Russell, because he's undercover, blows him off. Taft is played by Clarence Williams III.
We saw Clarence Williams in both Purple Rain, episode 4, and American Gangster, episode 83. I first saw him in reruns of The Mod Squad, a TV show from the early 70s.
Taft's partner is Hernandez, and he'll turn out to be, well, the kind of bastard that we expect cops to be. He's played by Julio Oscar Michoso.
I've seen him in Grindhouse, Toys, and for this podcast, we saw him in Bad Boys, episode 18, and Once Upon a Time in Mexico, episode 157.
He was the advisor to the president that betrayed the president in Once Upon a Time in Mexico.
Who was he in Toys? I don't even remember.
A toy?
A toy? Yeah. I have no idea.
At Russell's arraignment, David shows up to be his lawyer, with the chemical analysis results of what the cops found. Turns out it was a few kilos of talcum powder, so a possible carcinogenic substance, but not narcotics. Russell is free to go.
You know, I don't know much about legal stuff, not that much, but if I'm selling something, even if it is not actually drugs, can't I still be charged with selling drugs? Or some sort of crime? Because the intent, at least, was for me to be selling actual drugs, even if it turns out it wasn't. I think I can still get charged.
That's a good question, Joe. This movie isn't exactly what I would point people to understand how law works. David brings him to meet Felix at a bar where Eddie is super surprised to see him because, Eddie's a dirty, filthy rat. Felix makes Eddie really uncomfortable, so much so that Eddie stabs Felix with a fork If Felix wasn't going to kill Eddie already, he certainly was now, and he does, bludgeoning Eddie to death with a pool stick. Eddie dies, bleeding all over the felt on a pool table, and it's going to be a few $100s to get that fixed.
For those would-be criminals out there, if you're going to commit a horrific murder, have the guy who was the lawyer not be in the room. Just as a general rule. Don't have the lawyer there. Now you've just implicated him, and now he won't be able to help you when you get charged with anything. Well, which is why you have a lawyer.
Yeah, but also at the same time, if the lawyers can lie.
For sure, but also they can also turn rat, so why have him there?
Yeah. Russell is the new Eddie, and does a walk and talk so that David can introduce his secret designer drugs project to the plot. Turns out that Russell is really, really good at selling drugs. So good that it draws Ivy's attention, which results in a standoff, and then Ivy retreats.
The fact that he's really good at selling drugs, and also, I don't know if you ever saw Breaking Bad, but that's a school teacher who turns into like a
I know the plot
creator. Yeah, he's also apparently really good at it. So evidently, if you're an amateur, you go into the drug business, you may actually be very good at it, and you not even realize it.
Apparently, if you have drugs and you go to where people who want drugs are, they'll buy them from you.
That's fair. I guess that is true. That makes it much easier.
David shows up at a black woman's house to collect David so that they can go to the next scene.
David, we gotta go, man.
I like balling black chicks so much.
I don't know, maybe you feel like you're fucking a slave.
What do you mean, like a bondage thing?
No, like a racist
Hey,
thing.
what's the most intense sex thing you ever did? You ever been with two women at the same time?
Yeah, your mother and your father.
Oh, wow, yeah. Did my mama get buck wild on you?
Two things. First, David would be fun to do improv with. He's got next level yes and skills. Two, they sure don't dwell on the racism aspect of that for very long, do they? The writers had the courage to pose the question, and then they drop it for laughs.
Well, honestly, one is a bad lawyer, the other is a cop pretending to be a drug dealer. What more could they discuss? I mean, how deep were they ever going to get on that? David seems to be, if he wasn't a sleazebag, would be a lot of fun to hang out with.
Yeah. They go for some money laundering 101 with Betty, played by Victoria Dillard, who we only know is one of the women that were washing Eddie Murphy in Coming to America, which we saw for episode 17. She owns an African art store, and the ambiguous pricing of art coupled with the general United States ignorance of Africa keeps them off the law enforcement radar. Betty doesn't like Russell, but we've seen his neighbor lady twice and there's no sparks there, and someone has to be his romantic lead, so it'll turn out to be her.
You know, someone pointed this out, and I think this is 100% true, is that whenever they have a movie where two guys are friends, they have to introduce a romantic lead for one of the characters so people won't think they're gay. And I think that is 100% what people, because there's no reason, he doesn't have to have a romantic lead in this.
No, he doesn't.
It's completely unnecessary.
Mm-hmm.
But he's hanging out with another dude in that big pal, so don't want to suggest anything else going on there.
Yep. Some daytime in the future, Ivy shows up and kills one of Russell's dealers and tries to kill Russell too before speeding off. The way Russell drew his gun and took cover should have given him away as a cop, but apparently nobody noticed.
Well, with all the shooting, who could?
David and Russell have a talk about that and conclude that they have to kill Ivy or risk losing their market share. By they mean Russell, who will become David's partner in that enterprise after the deed is done. Russell tails Ivy to a club where he watches his Mark dance with the leather-clad getaway gal. He follows Ivy into a bathroom, and after the requisite hemming and hawing about whether or not to kill the black man who has killed 2 black people that Russell has seen with his own eyes, and after Ivy literally takes a piss on his shoes, Russell finally does it. Ivy's last words are special.
You fucking bitch.
I mean, dude, you're dying. Come up with something better than that.
Well, you know, he's under a lot of pressure. Like being shot, lying on the bathroom floor, probably lying in piss. It's like hard to come up with anything better. Let's see how your great words are when you get shot in the bathroom.
I hope they're better than, you fucking bitch. Russell takes a night to narrate his feelings about being a black man who, with no consequences, just killed another black man. Then David takes him to meet the nerd that knows how to make the designer drug thing. We can tell he knows because he can use a computer with some spinning 3D representations of chemical compounds. He says for $5 million, he can make enough of this stuff to supply the entire West Coast.
I don't know how much of the early 90s you recall about the, maybe you don't recall any of it, but there was a lot of talk about designer drugs and getting drugs that were legal, but you could still, sell to people because it was legal. And in point of fact, that's what a lot of people think the vitamin market is. That there are a lot of things that fall under the FDA rather than under the drug. Who covers drugs? Well, the DEA or whatever.
Well, the FDA is the Food and Drug Administration.
Right.
So they cover drugs too.
True, but a lot of those things on the market is just different.
Yeah.
And so you're allowed to have stuff that are sold out there like...
No, so you're describing supplements, right?
That's what I'm trying to say.
Right. Yes. If you have like melatonin, well, no, not melatonin, because melatonin is a known chemical compound that can be identified. There's a lot of the shit in the fucking vitamin aisle, right? And anything that's labeled as homeopathic, that is just unregulated. You don't know what the fuck you're taking, and it's probably not what you think it is because it costs money to actually make things accurate. And they can't make as much money if they do that.
Well, you can't compare it to homeopathic. Homeopathic is just water. So that...
No.
No? Really?
No. Homeopathy is based on two things. The concept that like cures like.
Right.
And the idea that the more diluted something is, the stronger it is.
Right.
There are homeopathic pills.
Right.
How do you do that with water?
Well, I'm not saying it's 100% water. I'm saying it's watered down. It's like...
Yeah, it's a sugar pill.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying.
That occasionally accidentally has actual medicine in it that it's not supposed to, because that's happened.
These supplements have real chemicals in them. There's no watering down there.
Yeah.
All right, anyway, back to the story.
Every few scenes, Russell meets with Carver to get tactical guidance and to have Carver negatively pep talk him back into the role he's playing. This time, Carver tells Russell that since he's now a much bigger deal of a dealer, he should upgrade his lifestyle to match. So Russell does that. He gets a new ride, new clothes, and a new pad. He starts sleeping with Betty because he can afford African art now. And
for some reason, she's attracted to him based on what?
Mm-hmm.
What before gave you the idea that these two would hook up?
She was introduced.
Other than he's black, she's black. How do you
That's
know?
All you need to know, Joe. That's the only thing you need to know.
George, let me tell you, if only it was that easy to get black women into bed, I would be so much happier. I'm black, you're black. Let's fuck.
Here's the thing. I have to introduce the black woman to you, apparently.
Oh, okay.
According to this movie. I have to have an unethical business relationship with her first.
Well, this is pretty unethical what we do here. we already have a business relationship.
I'm not sure that's true, Joe. I think we're pretty on the level. We don't know what we're talking about, and we are honest about that.
That's true.
Russell invites David over to chat about expanding their business. They even go so far as to discuss cutting Felix out by selling so much product that Felix's supplier would want to deal with them directly. They'd be the Sam's Club of narcotics. They have a meeting with Felix and Gopher to discuss getting enough product to impress the next one up the chain, and things go sideways because Felix is a paranoid psychopath. The dominance establishing behavior involves challenging David to a game of slaps. That is somehow code for one of us has to kill the other one, but later.
Again, they're really involved the lawyer in a lot of stuff. This thing is not wise. Yeah, don't slap the hands of your lawyer. Don't involve him in the drug trade. Don't have him stay clean so you have good representation.
Yeah. Now it's Felix's turn to be the cop-informing asshole. This scene is so full of assholery and slurs that I'm using one of my super slur chimes to handle it. There's a whole speech about two black people, Russell and Betty, getting arrested with a Jew, David, which will play great for the Republican voter base. I mean, they're not wrong. They just didn't need to script so many slurs in it to make that point.
I have to say, that is very enlightening for a bunch of criminals to go like, hey, you know what? We could also use this to help get Republicans elected. I didn't know the average thug out there even thought about that sort of thing.
They call Russell, Betty, and David Democrats.
Yes, that's right. Which they don't even really know do any of you actually vote? Let's just assume, well, they're both black, he's a Jew, Democrats. Which is exactly how the Republicans do it.
Mm-hmm.
They're not wrong 70 to 90% of the time, but still.
In another check-in, Carver blames Russell for not stopping the conflict between Felix and David and orders him to stay away from the sting. Russell blows that off, goes to the sting, and exposes it as such by finding Felix's mic. Then they kidnap Felix and have an utterly improbable limo versus police interceptor car chase, during which David shoots Felix in the hands before shooting him in the ass to force him out of the moving vehicle, after which Felix gets creamed by a police car. It was the funniest thing I'd seen in 1 hour, 7 minutes, and 14 seconds.
It was very cartoony, it's true. Like, bang, 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 then out of the car. It's not enough that he gets shot. Then he's got to get hit by a car. And he's standing up, but it's not like he's lying on the ground, hurt from being shot. He gets his men to stand up, or at least crouch down, and sees the car. Ah!
Mm-hmm.
There should have been like a boy.
There should have. The adrenaline affects each of them differently. Betty wants out completely. David wants to kill Betty for wanting out completely. Russell wants his cover to not be blown and the woman he's fucking to not die, and for the work he's put into this to not be in vain, so he talks David out of his homicidal desire. Betty is waiting at home, assuming she's going to be whacked. After all, they did just kill Felix, who was a much bigger fish than they are. Russell comes over to say that he's going to protect her.
And she should trust him. Why?
Good question, Joe. Gallegos is the next supplier up, and he's played by Arthur Mendoza, and neither of us know him from anything else. Gallegos sends a goon to collect Russell from his post-traumatic coital cuddling with Betty at gunpoint. The goon stops to lick Betty's face, takes Russell, and then it's daytime, and Russell and David are wearing suits at Felix's funeral. What was the goon for?
Well, they just needed them to get out of the bed with Betty, that's all.
Like, they couldn't have just, sent hey, Gallegos wants you at the funeral.
Yeah, but
okay, I'll be there, because I don't want the guy with the gun to come back for me. Just tell me where you want me. I'll go there. You don't have to lick my girlfriend, point a gun at.
Well, so it's good that they, apparently they either they're keeping eyes on Russell or they just knew those two were going to hook up. Because how did they know to go to Betty's place of all places to look for him? Because they're not looking for her, they're looking for him.
Mm-hmm. But Gallegos tells them that they owe $1 bajillion because that's what Felix owed. Then he rips out Russell's earring because he's a prick. Russell has one last meeting with Carver, who tells him to come in, as in, you're no longer in that assignment for disobeying the order to stay clear of the setup. Russell puts a gun to Carver's head, and Carver spills that the politics have changed. That the guy that enables Gallegos, his uncle, a politician in South America somewhere, I forget, but I'm also not sure that they actually specify.
I can't remember.
Is now someone the U.S. likes, so we don't want to fuck his game up. This is enough to almost completely disillusion Russell, who basically declares his intention to become the cover identity that he's, up till now, been role-playing as a cop.
I think a lot of this, at least for me, both when I saw this originally in 1992 and rewatching it, and then they also mentioned George W. Bush in this. So I don't know, again, how much you recall about the invasion of Panama.
Panama!
Yeah, there was a lot of talk about the invasion that Noriega, who was the dictator of Panama, had something on George W. Bush, who was at the time president of the United States and former CIA director. And they thought, well, that's why Bush is really invading Panama to shut Noriega up, except Noriega lives, so if Noriega had anything, for some reason he never spilled it, and still hasn't, he's still alive. But, and I think that's sort of where this plot sort of comes from.
Yeah.
Because we did, as we all know, American foreign policy sure loves to install certain people and then uninstall them, depending upon how we feel about them at any given time.
Yep. It's all too much for Russell, who has, until now, been extremely sober, as in he has never drank, smoked, or eaten any mind-altering substance. Now he gets high on his own supply in his car. And then Russell, still high as a kite, meets with David and Gopher tells him that Felix only owed $500 million, so Gallegos is taking advantage of them. So they come up with a plan. Step 1 is kill Gallegos, so they do that using a gun hidden in a briefcase full of money. They kidnap the goon from earlier, and he takes them to the red panel van where Gallegos was holding his uncle's money. They take the van and leave the goon tied up with a message for Gallegos' uncle that if he wants his money, he should come and get it. So before they do the final boss fight or whatever, Russell gives Betty some cash to get out of the country with, and Taft has a conversation with him about his dead neighbor lady saying it's Russell's fault for dealing drugs.
Taft, of course, if those who don't remember, is the cop
Yep.
who preaches the Bible and is played by...
Prince's dad.
Prince's dad, yes.
Russell and David set up on a ship in a shipyard, Gopher hiding with a video camera, and invite Gallegos' uncle, Guzman, played by Rene Asa, the last character to introduce and one more that Joe and I know nothing of, to come and talk.
I've seen crime movies before, and I understand you bump off one guy, and the guy it's been bumped off, you now work for the guy who bumped him off. I get that, but still, Gopher seemed to be sort of friends with
Well, he's a congenial little rat.
He seems not bothered. Okay, now I'm working with you guys. Okay with me. He's Mr. No loyalty there, Gopher.
No, I mean, the guy that he was loyal to is dead. He's not there to be loyal to anymore.
True. But he's hanging out with the guys who killed him. It's like, I don't know. Just seems wrong.
Not for nothing. Gopher was like, Felix, no, don't do this stupid, crazy shit that you're doing. Please stop doing that. This is really disturbing. I don't like it when you do that. So I can't really blame him.
True. What? I mean, we sort of mentioned it before. What exactly do you think was the relation between those two?
I think that Felix liked putting his penis inside of Gopher.
I get that apparently the criminals in this know about the political realities of Republicans and getting them to vote for the suburban families, all that sort of stuff, or vote, against Democrats, whatever. But I also didn't know they were good with gay people. Like, oh, our boss is a man who's having sex with another man. We're cool with that. I thought they were all homophobes. Apparently not.
You can be an asshole and still do because how many of the homophobe people are doing that anyway, and they're just doing that as a cover. I know it's not like the best thing to say, oh, they're a homophobe, they're a closet case. It's kind of bullshit, argument, but it happens. They fucking, they're doing stuff. I don't know, maybe you like just having a pet human laying around. Little squirrely human being. They offer to give Guzman his money and to go halvesies on the new designer drug that David brought a sample of. Guzman's goon tries it and says it's good stuff. Okay, I got it. I can't. I didn't even write something about it, but fucking a little compact with this stuff. He's like, hey, try that. All right, tries it. Yeah, you should buy this. What the fuck kind of product testing is that? How do you know that he should spend money on? Did you instantly get super high but not fucked up? But you somehow know that this isn't gonna crash your heart in 20 minutes? What the fuck is wrong with you? Come on.
Well, to be fair, he's not gonna be a regular user. They're gonna sell it to other people, so if their hearts crash later, who cares?
So a deal is struck, and the van is presented and lowered to the dock. Taft, who had followed them there, can't get back up because of Guzman's diplomatic status, so he tries to arrest them all by himself. Fucking idiot. Guzman and his guys leave. Russell and Taft end up in a standoff situation that David decides to end by shooting Taft. And this breaks Russell, who grabs Taft's radio and calls for a rescue ambulance. He tells David that he's a cop. David shoots Taft again, killing him the rest of the way. He tries to talk Russell into just being his cover ID. Russell doesn't want to, so he shoots David to death.
For a movie I found to actually be somewhat smart, I found that probably the dumbest part of it. I understand they need to wrap this up, but there is no way. I just don't see them getting in the shootout. I see David going oh, you're a cop? Oh, I really liked you. And just leave. I don't see him let's get in a shootout together.
Or, oh, you're a cop? I really liked you. You're on the ground with this guy. I'm holding my gun at the ready. I'm going to shoot the cop in the head.
Yeah, he could also do that. Everything makes more sense. Either him leaving or him shooting makes more sense than them standing there and getting into a shootout with him. Oh, well.
At a hearing, Carver shows that he's got Betty in custody, and that if Russell doesn't play ball and say nice things about Carver and the DEA, that Betty goes away for a long time. So Russell plays ball. He also has the court play the tape of Guzman making a drug deal, and since Carver didn't say anything about that, it's fair game, because that's how the world works at all. Russell ends up asking Carver that question from the beginning and then punches Carver in the stomach, again, because he can just do that and get away with it or something. That's not illegal to do in a courthouse. Presumably, Russell and Betty adopt the kid. Takes the kid to his mom's grave and narrates his wondering about what to do with the $11 million that he took out of the van. The end.
Yeah, but the cops wouldn't be on his ass for the rest of his life. Then again, we told the story about the cop with the money out of the drug property room, and he just, got a couple of years in prison? And not even prison, he got
180 days of home prison.
And then went on with his life. So
he got like an eighth of 2020 to 2022 years.
So maybe it is possible just to walk away with that $11 million. Anyway, George, does this still work?
Nah.
Really? Okay. Why?
It's so stupid. It's got too much stupid in it. It's got too many stupid things in it for it to work. David was amusing as a character. I enjoyed his character. But that's about it. Everybody else is just fucking off the wall nuts. Nothing makes sense in this movie. Like the way that they kill each other, how everybody gets away with everything. There's no consequences for anything. And I get that that's the thing. This movie is a really cynical and nihilistic view on law enforcement and drug, culture and shit. Like, but it's too cynical and nihilistic. It's so cynical and nihilistic that it breaks itself.
This is going to be one of these cases where I agree with you on everything, and yet I still think it works. I enjoy this movie. You're right. It's dumb, and it is cynical as fuck, and there is stuff that Russell does, like he would have been at the very least brought in by the cops, because they don't know he's undercover, right? So at the very least, he should have been brought in, talked to, and then maybe have Carver come in and go, no, he works for us or something. But
he was brought in by the cops. He was arrested, and Taft talked to him.
I mean, no. Later, when they do that whole race, the car chase and everything, nothing happens after that. If you remember, in fact, he even talks to Clarence Williams III's character, and they're just having a conversation. He's like, I can arrest you now. You just had the cop chasing you. Oh, yeah,
he was there. He was there at this thing and watched him kidnap the informant and no.
It doesn't arrest him. He can legally arrest him right there. No, you are 100%. It is stupid. But I can't say I didn't enjoy myself. It is very cynical, very dumb, and just a great movie. Just an entertaining movie. I had fun. I really enjoyed this stupid movie. And yes, the most of it is because of the performances of Laurence Fishburne and 100% of Jeff Goldblum. He is just a joy. He's an asshole in this picture, but he's so fun.
I even liked Felix. I don't know how many people are going to understand that he looks like Peter and Paul put together from Peter, Paul, and Mary. But I saw that, and I just wanted him to sing Puff the Magic Dragon the entire time. And Gopher was again, he's a character actor. He was definitely a character. And
yes.
He was a consistent character. He was squirrely and, Felix, don't do that, Felix.
He's gonna give up that little ass in prison.
Again, the acting wasn't the problem with this.
No, the script is off the wall, but
yeah,
I just enjoyed it. So split decision.
Again, you can enjoy something and it still not work.
Still not work. I think it works as a cynical crime movie.
Okay, fair enough.
But you're right. All your criticisms, I think, are correct. I make no allowances whatsoever. This is not. Believe me, if you've never seen this picture, folks, and you want to see it, prepare yourself for some really dumb shit, but entertaining as fuck. This was a Patron's Choice episode, and the poll for next month's film is already up on Patreon. The choices are Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure from 1989, Wayne's World from 1992, and Harold and Kumar Go to White Castle from 2004. If you want to vote but are not a patron, you can fix that by becoming one at patreon.com/DTSWpod. Now, George, what's up next?
Next week, we will be talking about High Fidelity from 2000.
Something we've already recorded, but we'll pretend we didn't. So I guess that's it for this episode. I'm Joe Dixon. Thanks for listening.
And I'm George Romanka. Thanks for listening indeed, because if a podcast drops and there's no one around to hear it, it's just another collection of ones and zeros that doesn't matter.
So tell me, David, what's the freakiest thing you ever did sexually?
Me?
Mm-hmm.
Really?
Brown shower.
I don't do that. Brown shower. Although, a woman sometimes when she comes will have a discharge that's liquid and copious. Mm-hmm. That can get on you.
You like that?
I like this suit. Where'd you get this furniture?
Yeah, it's nice. It's nice Italian lady picked this out for me.
It's so nice. Johnny Versace, right? Mm-hmm. Mike Tyson wears Versace.
David, come on. Take your feet off the couch. You don't do that at your mother's house, do you?
Nouveau Anal, I think this is called, but all right. And here, coaster.
You've been listening to Does This Still Work? Produced by Joe Dixon and George Ramaka. The hosts can be reached via social media, email, or the contact page at dtswpod.com. Be good to yourself and others, because that still works.
We know what we lose with aging, but what do you think you've gained?
If you were deported from America to Africa and you had to pick between Kenya, Botswana, or Tunisia to live, which would you go for? Should there be reparations?
So, Joe, where do you think COVID came from?